Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alicia and today I'm doing the Efftup Book Tag. This tag was originally created by Daniel at Guilty Feet. I will of course have their channel linked below, and I was so kindly tagged by Aaron Facer. I will also have his video linked below as well, and you should definitely go check out his channel. He's doing this really fun bookshelf tour because he's about to move and I'm loving it. The first prompt for this tag is a book that's effed up in a good way, and I picked The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern for this. In this book, we follow a grad student who remembers this day where he found a door that was kind of in this wall that he'd walked by before, and there normally isn't a door there, and he didn't go through the door. And then later, he finds a book that talks about what would have happened if he'd gone through the door. It is kind of a weird book, which is why I picked it, because Erin Morgenstern very much does magical realism. I adore her writing. She's one of my favorite authors of all time. I would not have considered it effed up until I actually heard some negative reviews about this book, which were basically just like, what happened? It doesn't make any sense. I disagree. I think this book makes a ton of sense. And I love it, and I think it's so good, which is why I picked it for effed up in a good way. The second prompt is a book that is effed up in a bad way, and for this I picked The Hike by Drew Magari. In this book, we follow this man who goes on a business trip and then decides to go on a hike. First thing he does when he gets to the hotel. And this book makes no sense at all. And I didn't like it. I thought I was going to maybe enjoy it because it was like he goes on a hike and he transports to kind of like a different dimension or a different world while he's on this hike. But this book makes no sense. There's no logic to anything that happens, and it's just so weird, and I don't understand it. And I finished this and I was like, I don't know what I just read. The reason I picked this book up is because it was at a book sale for like 88 cents, and I was like, I'm gonna give it a try. The synopsis sounds vaguely interesting. Honestly, this book is so effed up that I'm kind of having a hard time forming coherent thoughts about it, because it is like the author took every single idea they've ever had for a book, or that they ever could have for a book, and jammed it all into this one. And none of them make sense. Prompt number 3 is a book that everyone else loves, but you just think is effed up. And for this, I picked The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. This book is multi-generational and magical realism and just weird. And I don't remember a whole lot about it because it has been a while since I read it, but I definitely remember being confused and also kind of disturbed by some of the things that were happening. This book gets really high praise, but I don't see it. I don't personally understand why everyone loves this book as much as they do. I just thought it was messed up. Prompt number 4 is sexy and effed up. I don't have an answer for this. I don't read a lot of books that have sexual content in them, so I don't have an answer for a sexy scene that was, or a sexy book that was effed up. Prompt number 5 is effed up for kids. For this, I picked Tempests and Slaughter by Tamora Pierce. This, I believe, is classified as a YA, but when I was trying to read it, I did DNF this book because I found it so effed up. But when I was trying to read it, I thought the character was about 12. So I wouldn't classify it as YA. I feel like that's much more of a middle grade age range. And like, this book is supposed to be for kids. The reason I thought this book was so effed up and why I couldn't finish it is because there is a lot of talk about the changes that this young boy is going through and some of the things that is happening to his body. And as an adult woman, when I was trying to read it, it made me so incredibly uncomfortable because I was like, I do not want to know about these things. I don't need to know. And yeah, no, it's weird. I found the handling of the puberty element in this story to be incredibly uncomfortable and also honestly inappropriate for it to be talked about in the way that it was. I know I'm being pretty vague about exactly what happened. That is honestly because I do think Tamora Pierce handled it so poorly and it was so uncomfortable. This is a book that I would not let any kids I had or my nieces and nephew read because the subject matter of puberty was handled so poorly, and I don't think it should be handled in the way Tamora Pierce handled it. The details she was going into needs to be handled in more of like an educational setting, not in a fictional book. This is not really the place for kids to learn anatomical details. Prompt number 6 is an Efftup classic. For this I picked Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Do I remember what this book is about? No. Do I remember being confused? Yes. I don't know what happened. I feel like that's a common theme in this video for me is I don't know what happened because this book was so messed up and so confusing to me that I just kind of purged it from my brain. I remember being confused. I remember being like, what the heck is happening? This is messed up. And then my brain was like, we don't need to keep that information. So it's now gone. But this book was definitely effed up. I remember that much. Prompt number 7 is effed up in translation. For this book, I picked Vagabonds by Hao Jingfeng and translated by Ken Liu. Honestly, this book really isn't that effed up. And it's not really subject matter that I think it's effed up, and I don't think Ken Liu did a poor job of translating it. Overall, this book really isn't like that weird or that messed up or like anything like that. I actually think the reason it's effed up is because this book should have been at least 2 books. If I'm remembering correctly, there's 3 different parts of this book, and they all kind of cover 3 very different things. And I think the formatting was weird, and I think maybe it should have just been split into the 3 formats or the 3 different parts or the 2 different parts or 4 different parts, however many parts it was, I can't remember exactly. But each of them should have been their own shorter book, but gone into more detail of what was happening at that time. Because I found the plot of this book, the plot that carried us from part to part, wasn't as compelling as the one in each individual section. So a companion series where each of those sections was their own book would have been a little bit better for me personally, and I just think the formatting was a little bit effed up. Prompt number 8 is effed up nonfiction. I picked I Had to Survive by Dr. Roberto Canessa and Pablo Verchai for this. This is a nonfiction book about the Uruguayan rugby team that crash landed in the Andes Mountain and survived for like 72 days before they were able to be rescued. This is not the only book on that topic that I've read. This is just the one that I honestly have liked the most so far. But that story is wild and it's effed up. If you don't know about this rugby team, they got on a plane in Montevideo, Uruguay, and were trying to fly to Chile to play in a rugby tournament when their plane crash landed in the Andes, and they had to survive. As this book is called, I Had to Survive. They just had to do what they needed to do to survive. One of the things, and honestly, I think the main thing about the story that everyone knows is they did have to eat their other passengers to survive. So there is cannibalism in this book. There's a lot of talk of death, obviously, as they crash landed in the mountains. I think this story is so fascinating. It is definitely effed up, though. Prompt number 9 is illustrated effed up, and I, again, don't have an answer for this. I don't think any of the things that I have illustrated are really that effed up. I read some manga, you can see some of it here, but most of these I haven't actually read yet. And then I have graphic novels on one of my other shelves, but the ones of those I've read haven't been effed up. So this one I don't have an answer for. And prompt number 10 is Hanya Yanagihara's A Little Left Up, a book that is just misery porn solely designed to convince you how effed up the world is. I also don't have an answer for this one. I have never read A Little Life, and I don't really read books that are like that at all. Even the nonfiction that I have read, and even like the book I mentioned earlier, I Had to Survive, which has a very tragic and like there's so much misery in this book, and a lot of the other nonfiction books I've read as well. Read books about kidnapping. I read a book about the Columbine shooter. But even all of those books, the point of the books was not to convince you how messed up the world is. I don't really read misery porn. That's it for the Efftup book tag. I'm going to go ahead and tag Mason from Mason in the Dark and Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot. I know Sandy mentioned she might already be tagged in this, so if you are Sandy, consider yourself double tagged. And to everyone else, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!